on a Friday afternoon. I'm Graham Coffee. That is John Tweet Sports, aka John Smith. We are here to talk a little Georgia-LSU. This is our belated conference championship preview. So hopefully you guys will enjoy this on your commutes home or this evening and tomorrow morning as we lead up to LSU Georgia at 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon in the Mercedes-Benz Dome in downtown Atlanta. John, how are you feeling? What are you thinking about this game?
Man, I'm feeling good. What an interesting, wild year in the SEC, especially in the SEC West, right? I mean, if the SEC didn't have divisions, this would be Georgia versus Tennessee. But because we have divisions, we are getting LSU limping into Mercedes-Benz Stadium after getting beat by Texas A&M last week. So I think this game, there's a lot of intrigue that we'll get into as we talk and we have our discussion. But I mean, Kirby Smart has lost 3 in a row, SEC championship games in Mercedes-Benz, and so you have an opportunity to do 2 things this week if you're Kirby Smart: to win an SEC championship, which only I don't know if anyone on this team has won an SEC championship.
No, it was 2017. Yeah. Julian Rochester's gone now, so
so no one on the team has won an SEC championship. Kirby Smart has lost 3 in a row, and he's 0-2 versus LSU as Georgia's head coach. So he's got a big opportunity to do 2 things tomorrow and exercise some demons. So excited to see how this goes down.
Yeah, I am too. And, I think last year's season for Georgia was so phenomenal, and, you won the national title. And so that's obviously what kind of sticks in everyone's memory. But man, I remember doing it for the month between that Alabama loss and that Michigan college football playoff game, and it was tough, dude. Like, people were down and depressed, and it felt like anytime you tried to say anything positive about Georgia or the hopes that you had, like, because I thought Georgia was going to blow Michigan out in the Orange Bowl when I put on the tape, and there was a lot of pushback on that because that Alabama loss was so fresh for everyone, and I think that rivalry with Alabama and some of the implications with Saban and all that was very charged. And so I look at this now and I think LSU not being in contention for a playoff spot, does that take a little shine off this game? On the surface, yes, absolutely, but you're still talking about a team with, I think they're 7th in blue chip ratio in terms of their roster, which is 12 spots higher than Tennessee. Like there's a lot of good football players on this team, and they've had a lot of really good moments this season. And Jaden Daniels is a really interesting player. You're talking about a quarterback that's run for 1,000 yards this season already. There's a lot of good that's happened for LSU that I think a lot of people are kind of forgetting because of what they saw last week. But, before this Texas A&M game, this was kind of the crown jewel of the conference championship slate. You were talking about number 1 versus number 5, and just a lot of implications for both teams in terms of seeding and, for LSU in terms of actually trying to get into the tournament. So, yeah, I want to caution people to kind of, not gloss over this game too much, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, correct, right? So last year, I'll remind people with this game, and again, LSU, different team, different identity, which we'll talk about today, different, new coaching staff, and Brian Kelly and his first, real opportunity on the national stage to play for an actual championship in the SEC. But last year, ESPN's FPI gave Georgia a 70% chance to beat Alabama in this SEC championship game, right? We all remember last year, Georgia coming in, Alabama was stumbling against Auburn. Alabama had played LSU had played Alabama to a 6-point game last year. And so anything can happen in this game when you have this level of talent on both sides of the ball. These are guys that, at the end of the day, all of these players for Georgia and for LSU were highly recruited. They're all very athletic. They're all very physical. They all come from high school backgrounds and pedigrees of very the highest level of competitive football. And so anytime you have talent, this much talent on both sides of the ball, you better be prepared, because at the end of the day, anything can happen when you get in these situations. And we've seen it from Georgia, both, good and bad. Seen it, teams come into this game and just crazy stuff happens. Right. So I definitely am with you. I'm not taking this game for granted because LSU lost to Texas A&M and LSU didn't play that well versus Arkansas.
Right.
Because again, you look at the blue chip ratio, but you also look at, Jaden Daniels is an incredibly athletic quarterback, maybe the most athletic quarterback that Georgia is going to face all year. He's a little bit banged up, but you put these guys in these situations, and this is where the best players generally find a way to shine on these stages. And so definitely agree with you. Don't take it for granted. But also Georgia, Georgia's in a pretty good position. If you're going to win one, this is a good position to win one in right now.
Yeah. So you've done a lot of study on LSU, as we both kind of have. Like, what are your impressions, and how do you think they're going to try and approach this game?
Yeah, I think LSU. I think two things are gonna happen for LSU, because they have to happen when you play Georgia. LSU is going to be physical in this football game. This might be the most physical game that LSU plays all year, especially on the offensive line and the front seven of the defense. I think that LSU and Brian Kelly and staff are going to try early in the game, especially, to match up physically with Georgia and try to put Georgia in situations where the best way to neutralize a team with the talent of Georgia is come out and hit them in the mouth. I mean, it's 2022, but that's how you do it. It's even with the athleticism, the way that you try to neutralize that is you come out and you be physical. So I think LSU is going to be real physical. I think their wide receivers are big and physical. Butte, Jenkins, Neighbors, those guys. I think what LSU is going to try to do is they're going to try to put their wide receivers in positions where they are gaining, where they're staying ahead of the stick. So I don't see LSU. I don't think Jaden Daniels and I don't think LSU offensive line is in a state where they can try to sit back there and throw the ball down the field. But I do feel like they're going to try to take 7, 8, 10-yard chunks at a time, and maybe get Butte or Neighbors or one of those guys to try to break one. I think that's going to be their best bet. I also think that LSU is going to try to run the ball. I don't think it's a ball control kind of situation, but I think LSU is definitely going to try going back to that physical play. Just going to try to, for lack of a better term, they're just going to try to muck the game up, right? I mean, that's what that's what you do in a situation like this versus a talented defense and an offense that has scored a lot of points this year for Georgia. Is you try to do what Kentucky, I think, tried to do when they played Georgia. You just try to muck it up. You try to get into a position where you are controlling the ball as much as you can. And you're trying to neutralize, Georgia's ability to score points. So that's what I think is going to happen from the offensive side. The defensive side, I think it's going to be, all about getting to Stetson Bennett. I think they're going to try to turn Gay and Ojulari loose on Stetson Bennett. They have some good pressure packages with, Perkins and some of those guys. And I think it's just going to be a matter of can they get Stetson off of his game early? All of this is about getting Georgia in a position where, you've kind of knocked them off balance. So that's what I think LSU is going to try to do. And we'll see if it works.
Yeah, I think for me, I definitely agree with your kind of assessment or, I guess, analysis that LSU really likes to play physical. And I think a lot of people think like they have a really talented wide receiving core, which they do. And they've got, this mobile quarterback, and they do run some spread concepts. When you flip on the tape, there's a lot of, 11 and 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets, 1 tight end sets. And then even when they're not in that, tight end kind of heavy formations, they are running a lot of tight formations, and those wide receivers are big bodies. So those guys come in there and block, sometimes like a tight end to spring certain things in the run game. You look at LSU this year and you look at kind of their offensive tendencies, and you're talking about a team that runs the ball up the middle a lot. And we were talking about Daniels earlier, like, yes, he is, a scrambling threat, but they do run a lot of design runs. He's got 53 design runs this year for 6.7 yards an attempt. Some, lots of quarterback power, quarterback sweep concepts with him. So that's, I think puts even more like importance on the health of that ankle. But if you take him out of the running game, they run a ton of inside zone read. So far this season, 23.1% of all plays that they have run have been inside zone read, 182 attempts, and they have a 55.5% success rate doing it. And, that's a lot of yards. Like, I mean, they've run for almost 1,000 yards just off inside zone read in 2022. And then, their second most used play is inside power. So, I mean, this is a lot of, like, you look at their middle three of that offensive line, and they are, getting behind those guards and center a lot. And that seems to be kind of their, what they feel like is the strength, I think, of their front five. And it's interesting because if you look at how those guys pass protect on that offensive line, like the right tackle, Emory Jones, different Emory Jones. Yeah, number 50. Like, he's given up 31 pressures this year and has been a huge liability. But then you move over next to him in the right guard, 75 Bradford, is a really, really good run block, a little bit of a weakness at guard. And so I think for Georgia, a lot of this game on defense comes down to the fact that you have Jalen Carter and they don't. And that you have Nazir Stackhouse as well, who has been, I think, probably one of the more unsung players on this UGA roster this year. He's done a phenomenal job, and it seems like he's gotten better week by week. But, like, he's been a monster against the run over the last, half of the season, I would say, going back to that Tennessee game in particular. So I think that bodes well for Georgia, but it's also, if you're LSU, if you look at Daniel's stat line, he's a 68% passer. And then you start getting into that a little more, and you realize, like, when you turn on the tape, I think what I see is a guy who is a half second late on and kind of like needs to see the guy open before he feels comfortable releasing it. He's not a quarterback who's throwing guys open or is particularly good with timing routes beyond, like, curls and stuff that are just taking advantage of, like, large cushions his receivers are getting. So I think it just makes things interesting, because it's like, if he's not at his usual, athletic ability and scrambling ability, excuse me, with that ankle, then, we saw this against Tennessee for Georgia some, where, they were only rushing 4, maybe 5. And, and there were times where Tennessee's offensive line would do a pretty good job and give Hendon Hooker, 4 or 5 seconds to throw, but nobody would come open because that back end was just really, really locked in that day and did a phenomenal job. And I think, if I'm LSU, that's my concern, is that Daniels, there's a lot of plays where he will get a one-on-one matchup. And you would think with the size of those receivers, man, like Butte is a big body, Neighbors is a big body, Jere Jenkins is a guy, he plays 90% of the time on the boundary, and I think is very impressive in the air, has good body control and good ball skills. And then you get that big tight end, Taylor. Like, that's 4 big dudes to throw the ball up to. And, doesn't look very comfortable throwing those 50-50 ball in one matchups a lot of the time. And there's part of me that's like he's less mobile probably, so maybe that helps Georgia sack him and keep him in the pocket. There's also part of me that's like mobility force him to just let it rip, because I think that's what you got to do if you're LSU. All right, Jaden, you got to go out there and you got to throw that ball up when it's Ringo and Neighbors on the edge and see what happens. And that's, our best shot. And I don't think, like everybody else Georgia's played, I don't think they can just drive the ball down the field on Georgia, especially as dependent on the run and the inside run as they are. I think they need big plays, and I think they kind of need to score from far. I think they need to stay out of the red zone almost.
Agree. Yeah, I think the tighter the field gets for LSU, I think the tougher it's going to be for them for two reasons. One, Jaden Daniels' mobility, like you mentioned, but two, I don't, Georgia has been extremely good in the red zone, and I also think if you can't if there is a weakness on Georgia's defense, a lot of it is in the boundary or sometimes in some of those intermediary throws where you get guys like we saw it against Georgia Tech, right? Where Georgia Tech got a mismatch with Javon Bullard and Tech Gibson was able to hit a guy over the top for, 30 yards down the field for a shot. That's really your best chance at beating Georgia is finding these kind of intermediate mismatches with a guy like Javon
20
Bullard
to 30 yard plays. Yeah,
you have to. And so if you get it in tight on Georgia, the physicality of the defensive line is going to beat you, or the secondary just doesn't have to. They don't have to think about anything behind them, and that's when they play their best. And so, I think that you're exactly right. I do think you bring up a great point too. If I'm Brian Kelly, I probably am telling Jaden Daniels just let it rip. You don't have anything to lose. You're not in a situation where. Yeah, a close loss is going to get you nothing at this point. A win is, at the end of the day, is really not going to get you that much either. Maybe a better New Year's Six bowl, but at the end of the day, you don't have anything to lose by going out and turning the ball over and losing badly. If that sounds tough, right?
That's right.
But losing to Georgia by 10 versus losing to Georgia by 25 in this game is not going to do anything for LSU. No. There's no moral victory that's going to help them with recruiting or anything else. So you might as well go ahead, go out and let it rip. Let these wide receivers go up and try to go up for 50-50 balls. Let the wide receivers be physical on the boundary and on the outside. And, you mentioned this in our preview, our season preview way back when we were talking about LSU this year. And you mentioned, that LSU may have the best wide receiving core in the SEC. And I think that's still true. I think these guys, I think, they may not have proven to be the best necessarily in the production, but I still think they're probably equally as talented with any other group, including Tennessee. When you look at how they play the game, and so I think it's a great point. If I'm Brian Kelly, I am definitely I'm letting it all hang out. What else are you going to do? It's at the end of the day, it's there's nothing to do but like our our friend at another school said, just got to drop your nuts. And let it. So South Carolina,
in the words of Cam Smith,
the words of Cam Smith.
I think you're right. And then, one thing I kind of did when I was working on the deep dive preview over at Dog Central, which you guys can go check out. It's free on dogcentral.com. But man, I started looking at Daniel's downfield passing numbers, and I was just kind of shocked. Like Jack Beck, who is their kind of second tight end, like their blocking tight end, he has more 20+ yard catches this year than Booty and some of these other receivers. And I think you look at Daniels on throws of 20+ yards this year, he's just 6 of 20 when throwing down the left sideline, and he's 5 of 11 throwing down the right sideline, and then down the middle, he's 5 of 8. And so it's I think he, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about, where it's he needs to see guys open. and they run a
Yep.
lot of like, flood stuff where, they're going to roll him to one side of the field and he's going to be able to see down that, down that hash and see somebody coming open instead of having to put more trajectory on the ball and lift it over a defensive back. And you also see a lot of plays where, if they're having success down the middle, like we were just talking about, like a lot of times it's throwing down the center of the field, especially if he's in the pocket. So I think that's the like fascinating thing here is, can he do that? You know what I mean? Because like the numbers would say, if he's throwing outside the numbers, on 20+ yard throws, he is 11 of 31 this year, which is, right about 35%, which, you might hear that and think, well, that's not bad for deep shots. But like you look at Bennett, you look at Hooker, you look at a lot of other, productive quarterbacks in the SEC and nationally, and those guys are around 50% in that category. So, that's a pretty significant drop off of, that's one or two less completions out of every 10 passes. And I think, we've talked about Ringo a lot over the course of the season, and he had a little bit of a rough start to that game against Georgia Tech. But at the end of the day, you flip it up and it's like they targeted him 9 times. They had 3 completions for 30-something yards. And, probably most impressively, he had 3 pass breakups in that game where, he's getting his hand on the ball. So I was impressed with how he responded. And I think that's one area that Georgia is kind of fortunate in is that these guys on that back end, even the young guys like Starks, have played, basically a full season of football now. And Ringo has given up enough plays as a college player to where he's not going to get too high or low. You know what I mean? Like he's never too up or down. And I think that's a huge advantage for Georgia in this game, because I think there's a chance he does give up, an early deep ball or two, but we know he's going to just kind of keep rolling, and he's likely to maybe make a pick as well, so.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, so Jaden Daniels has 12 big time throws per PFF. So it's essentially a throw that's generally further down the field in a tight window. It's kind of like that the money ball they've thrown. So he has 12 this year out of 348 attempts or 238 completions. But 8 of those, I'm sorry, have come in the last 4 games. Right. So what LSU has been doing, I think they had to do it against Texas A&M, but they have been doing a lot of what we're talking about. I mean, they've been trying to push the ball a little bit more. And I think, I agree with you. I think Ringo, I think a lot of the Georgia fan base, because of the struggles early versus Georgia Tech, have given Keely Ringo a little bit of too much grief over this last week. I think in this type of game, Keely Ringo has definitely proven himself this year, right? Tennessee kept throwing at him, and with very little success. And so I think you're in a position that you're going to have to find. You're going to have to, LSU will test that. They will test Keely. I think they will test Javon Bullard in coverage. But at the end of the day, it is going to come down to Georgia's, really that front four. And I also think, Jaden Daniels is hobbled, but Georgia is going to have to do a better job than we've done in the last few weeks of setting the edge with some of the run game.
Yes.
Because I do think the key to opening up that pass and taking those targets downfield is being able to run the ball effectively. And that is a concern for me personally, as you get, some of LSU's running backs on the edge, or maybe even Jaden Daniels, if he's a little bit hobbled, he's able to get outside a little bit. And that could definitely cause some problems for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, we were talking, I don't know, 10 minutes ago, I was giving you, like over 33% of LSU's plays this year have been inside runs, inside power, and inside zone.
Yeah.
But if I was LSU and I turned on the Georgia tape, I would zone read the shit out of Chaz Chambliss every time I saw him on the field. And I'm sorry, that's just the reality. And we've kind of talked about it at this point. Like, we don't have anything against Chaz. I think he plays hard, but just he doesn't often play the run very well. And, I think Georgia, Robert Beal is no phenomenal run stopper, but he does it right 9 out of 10 times. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like he plays things the right way, even if he's not making the tackle, he's forcing guys into his help. And I think if you're LSU, like I would make Chambliss, if I see him in the game, even if it's 3rd and 7, I would make him prove that when I put that, if I'm Daniels and I put that ball into the mesh point with my running back, I want to see him stop, and I want to see him open his body to me and, force that handoff, because his tendency has been to crash into the backfield and leave a lot of space behind him, off the left or right side of the line. And even if Daniels is 80%, he's fast enough to take that open lane and get 10 yards and a first down. So, yeah, I'm very curious to see if LSU will break tendency. And I'm curious to see how Georgia does against these tackles who have not been great this year, because I think like this could be a breakout game for a Michael Williams. I think this could be a big day for a guy like Ingram Dawkins, who we are seeing Georgia play more and more on the edge. Like it seems like, Georgia knows that they are light on true edge bodies right now.
Yep.
And Marvin Jones Jr. got his ankle dinged up last week. So that's a 5-star guy that's built the way that you want your edges to be built. And he made some really nice plays at the end of that Tech game against their first team. And then all of a sudden he goes down. So I think you will have to see, even Carter playing some kind of like 4-eye Trevon Walker style defensive end, alignment where these guys are tight and it's their job to 2-gap and to be responsible for both the, outside shoulder of the tackle and the inside shoulder of the tackle and jumping into those gaps if a running play comes that way. So we'll see how it goes. But I do think like Georgia's defensive line is probably the best one that LSU has played. And the best one that they've played probably before that from a talent standpoint was Texas A&M. And we kind of saw what Texas A&M did to them in that game when they got sort of into the mud. So I think Georgia may have kind of there's been so much talk about Georgia's pressure this year. And I've come to the conclusion that like when Georgia wants to get pressure and needs to get pressure, they get pressure normally, but teams have been like basically surrendering the idea like that they can get pressure all year and saying we're going to get the ball out in under 2 seconds. And I think LSU can't really do that in this game. And that's not Daniel's game. So I think we are going to see some plays where, Georgia's getting in the backfield and chasing him around. And, Georgia's secondary is going to have to do a good job of kind of scramble drill type stuff and staying well in position. And you might see a pick or two on Saturday from Georgia as well, just as I think this game could snowball on LSU a little bit to where they just start having to do things they're not comfortable with.
Yeah, I think so. My prediction, and I would love to hear. I would love to hear some thoughts on who you think is going to be MVP on offense and the defense for Georgia this week. But before we do that, I think Georgia is going to try to come out and have the kind of start that they had versus Oregon, right? Like I think Georgia's going to try to come out and put LSU in a really tough position where like Georgia forced Bo Nix to start having to try to take some shots because they just came out and started so quickly. And I think it's going to be the same thing.
Yeah. So Stetson does have a 2017 SEC championship ring.
Robert Beal has one too, apparently. So Robert Beal and Stetson Bennett have a championship ring. They are the lone two on this roster.
Nice. Yeah, I think so. I mean, what are your MVP kind of selections?
I think, I think my MVP. So I think on the offensive side of the ball, I think, it's tough to pick one, but I think Darnell Washington is going to have a big game. I think both from a blocking standpoint and from catching the ball. If I had to pick, I think he's going to be the X factor. I obviously think Georgia's going to use Brock Bowers, I think, Georgia's probably going to try to do some of the similar stuff they've done with Ladd this year as well. But I think Darnell Washington is going to have a big day on the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, I'm gonna say Javon Bullard. I think Georgia's going to try to do some of similar things that they did to Tennessee and Hendon Hooker, especially with Jaden Daniels being a little banged up. I think Georgia's probably going to send Javon Bullard on some pressure packages a pretty good bit and just try to force the issue with Jaden Daniels and see if he can get off the spot or not. So I think Javon Bullard is going to have a big day on the defensive side.
Yeah, I like it. I think, just to kind of give you a little more evidence on that Darnell Washington case, Texas A&M ran the ball outside the tackles a ton on LSU last week. Going off the right edge with an inline tight end, 6 carries for 73 yards, 12.2 yards an attempt. And then running off the left edge with an inline tight end, 12 carries for 77 yards. And the longest of those 12 carries was like 17, which is a chunk play, but five of their 12 carries off the left edge went for first downs. So, I mean, they were consistently getting success. This wasn't the case of hitting one play after being shut down all night. And then they had 10 carries for 62 yards off left tackle. So I expect Darnell to be in there run blocking a lot tomorrow as you do. And, I also expect Georgia's tackles to do a lot of work as well. I think for me, I'm very interested to see how Georgia plays this. I think Georgia is going to come out a little more aggressive, like you were saying, kind of a la Oregon game in Atlanta. I think Georgia will use that short passing game some and kind of, use some of that screen game and also take some shots downfield because I think they want to leave that running game open. And I think Georgia's going to run the ball plenty, but I think, we're going to see a large percentage of Bennett's passing attempts in the first half as Georgia kind of tries to build a lead and run a little bit of tempo. So I am going to go with old reliable here. I think Brock Bowers
love it.
Kind of, dude, he had 15 catches in this game last year? Something absurd.
Yeah.
That everyone
15 catches for 170 something yards. It was insane. Yeah.
I think we're going to see Georgia try and get him in space and let him do some things after the catch. And everyone's concentrated on shutting him down this year and taking him away first, and rightfully so. But I think, Georgia, I'm hoping, and, the more that I hear, the more positive I feel that we are, as likely to see A.D. Mitchell tomorrow as we have been all year since his injury. It feels like, and not just see him as a decoy, but actually him out there, taking kind of a George Pickens number of snaps from this game last year, in the teens maybe. So that really changes how you have to defend Georgia. And, even if he's not wide open, just lofting a ball over to him on the sideline out of bounds just changes how the safeties have to think. And I think probably opens some things up for Bowers. So I'll go with Bowers as offensive MVP. And then on the defense, I'm going to go with Michael Williams, man. I'm going to stick with my guns there. I think, I think he comes in and kind of crashes into some gaps and has some nice plays in the run. But I'm going with 2+ sacks for Michael tomorrow.
All right. I love it. Well, if Michael gets 2+ sacks and Brock Bowers gets 8 catches, I think it's going to be a gigantic day.
It's going to be a bloodbath.
It's going to be an absolute bloodbath.
So what do you think? Do you have a final score prediction?
I do. And I do think it's going to be a bloodbath. I think Georgia, I think Kirby Smart, I think two things Kirby Smart has said this week that's been very clear for Georgia. One, this team is trying to do something that last year's team did not do, which is win an SEC championship. And couple that with, with Kirby losing his last 3 SEC championship games as a head coach. I think they're pulling out not all the stops. They're going to save a good bit for the playoffs, but I think they're pulling out most of the stops tomorrow. And I think it's going to be a 44-13 kind of game. I could even see it being, 44-10 10 or maybe even 44-6. But I'll give LSU a touchdown and a couple of field goals. So 44-13.
So I'm in the same ballpark with you in terms of how many points LSU will score. I got them at 13. Proof that I didn't steal it from you, that on the article that I posted last night for my game preview. But I got Georgia at 34-13, which would be kind of some interesting symmetry because Georgia lost the 2003 SEC championship game to LSU by that score, and I was there. They got us, I think, twice that year in 2003. I wouldn't be shocked at all if Georgia gets to 40 points in this game. I just think, I think Georgia's going to score 24-27 in the first half, and then just do the, the boa constrictor thing that they do and run the ball a lot and just kind of try to get out of there as healthy and as quickly as possible over the last 20, 25 minutes of this game. So we'll see. But yeah, I do like Georgia. This Georgia team, when they can run the ball, they can do almost anything. And we've seen them kind of get back to basics the last couple of weeks, trying to make sure that they're running the ball well. This offensive line, from what I've been told, has had one of their best kind of stretches of practice of the year. And I think this team really, really wants to do something that last year's team didn't do. And I think they want to finish this thing the right way and go 15-0. And I think they're going to come out focused. And last year against Alabama, this team was not locked in and focused the way that they should have been. And kind of, that success of the regular season sort of got to their heads a little bit. And that's kind of the beauty for Georgia of the last couple of weeks of, playing a 10-point game against Kentucky that was pretty ugly to watch for everybody. And then, sort of, being in a close game at halftime with Georgia Tech, it kind of humbles these guys a little bit, I think. And, that there might be some intention behind that from the staff as well in terms of how some of that's played out. So I expect Georgia to have a good performance. I don't think you're going to see, double reverse touchdown passes or, too many crazy wrinkles, but I think Georgia's going to get the ball downfield enough to keep LSU from stacking the box against that run game. And if they can do that, then they're going to have a nice day.
I like it. Well, there are our predictions: 44-13, 34-13. Either way, I think Georgia fans will take that. Graham, do you want to talk a little bit about the other championships in the college football playoff?
Yeah. Right. So
we have
that question. Let's go ahead and answer that.
Yeah. All right. Question from an Auburn fan. Auburn fan here, just wondering why many people don't want to see Alabama get in the college football playoff. Are they afraid or what? Just wanted to know. Why do people not want to see Alabama get in the CFP?
I don't think there's a conspiracy behind it. I think it's because they've lost 2 games. They don't deserve to be in the CFP. I mean, I heard the argument of Bama should be 5 over Ohio State because 2 of the games they lost this year were on the last play. Well, the problem with that logic is that they also, won 3 games on the last play. So it's it's not, it's not just they blew everybody out and they had these 2 really close games that were losses. What's the best win on their resume? Probably Ole Miss, right? They beat Ole Miss 30-24 in a game where they had 317 total yards. You know how many teams have had less total yards than that against Ole Miss this year? 2, Georgia Tech and Central Arkansas. Every other 9 teams that Ole Miss played this year put up more yards on them than Alabama did. So long story short, they're just not that good of a football team. And if they didn't have a script A on their helmet, they, I guess they don't have a script A on their helmet, but if they didn't have crimson helmets with numbers on the side of them, they, I think they would be ranked more around 10 than 6. And it's just, when you talk about game control, they have not controlled games this year at all.
That's all very astute analysis for the 2022 season. I'll tell you why many people don't want to see Alabama get in the CFP. It's because of damn Alabama privilege. No one wants to see an Alabama team who did all the things that you just mentioned, who came within 3 plays of losing potentially 5 games this year, to get into a college football playoff just because they're Alabama. And I think it goes back to the 2017 season, which – kudos to Alabama. They won a national championship on a walk-off, 2nd and 26. But that team didn't even win their division and got in the college football playoff. Got to sit at home and watch an SEC championship and slide into the college football playoff. That's why people don't want to see Alabama get in the college football playoff. Yes, they are undeserving. Yes, they played poorly this year. Yes, they had 2 losses, all those things. At the end of the day, it is because 2017, when they got to sit there and watch Georgia and Auburn beat each other to death, and Tyler Simmons was onside, and all of those things happen. The repeat of that happening again in 2022 is what at least Georgia fans do not want to see, and I think most of college football is some similar sentiment to that. We don't want to see you be able to sit at home while other teams go out and play a 13th game, and then you slide into the playoff because you couldn't even win your division. And so that's my thoughts. And I think at the end of the day, I don't think it matters, because I don't think the committee is going to put Alabama in, even if USC and TCU lose.
I think Ohio State gets in.
Correct.
All right, but so here, cousin Eddie makes a very good point here. They lost too many games to make the college football playoff, and they let them in. I've been kind of, I put out some of those stats on Twitter this week, and of course, like Bama Twitter found it and was like, you're scared, and I was like, dude, nobody's scared of a team that like gave up 50 to Tennessee. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
one is scared.
Give me this Alabama team. I watched them against Tennessee. I watched them. Yeah, please.
I would rather face them than Michigan. I think I'd rather face them than Ohio State, honestly. I think them and USC are pretty similar. No offensive line, all-star quarterback, good enough receivers to make some things happen, and bad defense. So nobody's scared of the Alabama mystique this season. There's not some fear-based thing going on here. They're just not.
No one is scared of Bill O'Brien. No one is scared of Bill O'Brien.
That's a quote of the century right there. I think that, I hope that answers the question. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of the 12-team CFP, because that announcement was made, and we can do probably a 2.5-hour podcast on that.
And we might in the off season. Maybe that'll be a good,
or even maybe between the championship game and the playoff, we'll talk about it. But you know what? I'm going to avoid that entirely. Let's just talk about the rest of the conference championship slate, and we'll give some thoughts and analysis. So tonight we have actually, before the Pac-12 championship game, we have the Conference USA championship game. Good old CUSA, North Texas Mean Green on the road at UT San Antonio. The Roadrunners. This is a big Roadrunner household, for the record. Jeff Traylor, one of the GOAT college football coaches, in my opinion.
UTSA.
UTSA is an 8.5-point favorite. That's a big line. Do you have any plays for this game personally, or any thoughts?
Man, I will be very surprised if UTSA doesn't cover this 8.5. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I think the over/under is like 70, right? Or it's maybe more than 70. But the over/under is
70.
Yeah, it's okay. So it's 70. Yeah, this game, these two teams have the propensity to score a lot of points. I'm just gonna, my lock is UTSA covering the 8.5. I think North Texas is going to be is going to be a little bit outmanned by this 10-win UTSA Roadrunner team.
I agree. I agree that UTSA is going to be better than North Texas. I think UTSA has not just a good Conference USA G5 defense. They have a good college defense. I think they're top 10 in most defensive categories. Yeah. So I'm going to go with the under 70. I think it's gotten. Yeah. I think that number is too much.
Agree.
I'm not, sprinkling my life on it or anything like that, but just in case the Pac-12 title gets out of hand, you want to have a rooting interest in the other game happening. So,
and I think I think if UTSA and Texas was 61 point total, I think it's hard to find North Texas and UTSA getting 10 more than that for sure.
That's fair. All right, Utah USC, big game, playoff implications potentially. We think, we don't really know. USC lost a thriller, one of the better games of the college football season, in my opinion, the first time around on the road in Salt Lake. Utah scored and went for 2 with the game on the line at the end of regulation because Kyle Whittingham is a dude, and got it. And I think they won 49-48 on the night that they were honoring one of their fallen teammates with his likeness on their helmet. It was a really cool scene. I think Keithy, the tight end, had 16 catches in that game. I got back from covering the Georgia Vanderbilt game, left Kirby Smart's press conference, and came home for the last quarter. And not home, but went back to the hotel for the last quarter. It was a lot of fun. What do you think we see tonight? Historically speaking, we normally see the loser of the first game win the rematch.
Correct. There is the old adage in college football that is very hard to beat the same team twice in one season. We've seen that play over and over as Georgia fans, right? We saw it last year where Alabama beat Georgia in the SEC championship, and then Georgia beat Alabama in the national championship just a few weeks later. I think that USC is a better team than Utah. Not a more complete team. I think USC's defense can be hot garbage, but I think USC is a better team playing better football at this very moment than Utah. I think you saw Oregon put Utah in some tough situations and beat them 20-17 in a low scoring game by Oregon standards just a couple of weeks ago. And I think USC, I think there's too much on the line for USC. And honestly, I think there's too much on the line for Caleb Williams specifically. I think Caleb Williams is playing as good as any quarterback in the United States of America right now. And when they played earlier, he already put up 42 on them in their place, and the defense couldn't hold. I think it'll be different this time around. I do think it'll be close. I don't think USC is going to go out there and blow the doors off of Utah. But I do think that the USC offense is just going to be too much for what Utah is going to be able to produce from that offensive side of the ball. And I think Utah's defense is just, the things that they weren't able to stop USC before. And so you have a blueprint that you can, I think, just continue to exploit versus this Utah defense this time.
Yeah, I so badly want to take Utah here because of the way that they just mollywopped Oregon last year and then a rematch. If you look at Utah this year, I don't think Cam Rising has really been healthy the second half of the season. He's not running the ball. And Tavion Thomas is out, who is a really good running back and, is a big part of their identity. I just think Utah's a little too banged up, and they've kind of been a little bit of a clunker at times away from home this year. I think, oh God, man, I'm going to pick USC to win this game.
Yeah.
And -2.5, I feel like is almost, that's what scares me about this, man. What does Vegas know that I don't? Because I feel like the spread should be closer to a touchdown. And I think what Vegas knows is that nothing ever goes right for the Pac-12. and that, like it would be so on brand for the Pac-12 for all of us to be assuming USC. Like people are already talking about Georgia-USC matchup first round.
Graham, this is called the Bill Walton principle. The Bill Walton principle is the worst thing that could possibly happen for the Pac-12 is what's going to happen.
Right.
The Bill Walton
all right.
principle.
You know what? Screw it, man. I changed my pick. Utah in the upset. Mark
all
down.
right.
They're getting the win. That's what always happens to the Pac-12 is a lawless land in the Western Territories, and Utah they do it. They got the grit and they got a defense, and I think their defense. Well, I trust their defensive staff more than USC's actually. Mm-hmm. Like their defense will have a plan for Caleb Williams after getting shredded last time around.
Listen, one of the things that you do know is
Kyle Whittingham right now. Utah money line.
Utah money line. Well, Kyle Whittingham will have this team ready to play, right? I mean, Kyle Whittingham, if there's one coach in America that can get his team ready for a fist fight, it's definitely that guy. I still think Caleb Williams is going to be too much. I think he's just competing at too high of a level right now, but could totally see it going the other way.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Saturday, we're going to skip over the MAC title game, Toledo, Ohio. I'll just tell you that I'm on Ohio, okay? Ohio has been good to me personally this year. Ohio +3. Kansas State, TCU. Horned Frogs, 1.5-point favorite. Kansas State coming in pretty hot. Kind of had TCU on the ropes the first time the two played, and then
not kind of. Kansas State was up 28-10 in the second
and lost
quarter.
2 quarterbacks.
Yep.
This time around, they've benched Adrian Martinez. They've gone with Will Howard, which I think is the right move for them. Mm-hmm. Like he does more with his arm.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna, spend too much time on it, dude. I'm picking Kansas State to win.
Nice. All right. We're going to be on the opposite side of this one too. I'm going to pick TCU to win. I think, TCU has shown 2 things. One, they've shown that their defense can play significantly better than it played earlier in the year. If you look at the Texas Tech game all the way through, 24 points allowed to Texas Tech, then 10 allowed to Texas, 28 to Baylor, 1 on that last second field goal, 14 allowed to, I think I don't know if Iowa State scored 14 points against anyone this season, but just not a good offense to judge.
Scored 9 on Kansas.
Correct, but I do think that the TCU defense has been playing significantly better, and again, I think TCU is in one of those positions where it's just hard. The game is in Arlington, which is right in TCU's backyard. It's hard to have this much on the line and not expect Sonny Dykes and TCU to be able to pull it out. Also, I think the TCU being a 1.5-point favorite is actually a beautiful thing because Las Vegas knows that TCU has won 7 straight games or something, or won 7 straight games by 1 possession. So I think even if it's a close game, I think TCU has shown the ability to pull us out. So I'm going to go TCU to cover the 1.5. All right, maybe we'll get on the same page on the next one, Graham. Where are we going next?
Do you have any thoughts on Coastal and Troy?
I think Troy's going to win. I think John Summerall is a really good coach, doing a great job with that Troy team. Had the big win versus App State earlier in the year when game day was there. And, I think Troy's doing really good, playing really good football.
Perfect. Okay. Dog out west special here. Fresno +3 against Boise. Trust me on this. I watch a lot of Mountain West football. LSU Georgia, we've already shared our thoughts on.
Yep.
I bet Georgia. I caught an early line last Saturday afternoon at Georgia -14.5. If 17.5 is that hook sucks, man. I'll be honest.
It does, yeah.
But would you play Georgia in this game if you were a neutral bettor who wasn't afraid of cursing? the Bulldog.
If I was a neutral bettor, I probably would not play Georgia to cover the 17.5. Georgia hasn't been very good versus the spread, and that hook is what scares me. As a complete homer, I will definitely put some money on Georgia to cover. But no, I would also, I think I would for me, I would also stay under the 52. I could see, I could see Georgia sprinting out to a pretty good lead and then doing the quintessential Kirby and slowing it down a little bit in the second half.
Perfect. Yep. Okay. UCF Tulane.
UCF Tulane, man, are we going to ride
Tulane
the Gus
favored
bus?
by 3.5?
Yeah, are we going to ride the Gus bus to a New Year's Six bowl? I'm not. Yeah, I think Willie Fritz flirted with Georgia Tech with taking a new job and then decided to, or whatever happened, ended up staying at Tulane. I think Willie Fritz is a really good football coach. I think Tulane. One thing has to happen if Tulane can stop the run game for UCF, which teams have been able to do this year, but you got to stop John Reese Plumlee, get him contained, and I think Tulane can do that. And I think it'll be, I don't think it'll be an easy win, but I think Tulane will win a close one. But I do think they'll cover the 4.
Great. I'm going with Tulane as well. I think they're going to have a little bit of like a feel good kind of, just how should I put it? Just good vibes based on the whole kind of Fritz turning down Georgia Tech, aka Georgia Tech didn't have enough money. Mm-hmm. That whole thing will, I think, power them a little bit. Clemson, North Carolina. Clemson favored by 7.5, which I would love this more if it was 6.5, but I am going with Clemson, man. This Carolina team has kind of hit the skids here at the end of the year, which is sort of the MO for all Phil Longo offenses, is to start out well and end poorly. Drake May is really good. Josh Downs is really good. The offensive line and defensive lines are not. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, it's a weird spot because it seems like the cat's kind of already out of the bag. The DJU maybe heading to the portal. Drake May might be heading to the portal. Like, this is just a really weird game against two teams that don't seem like they really want to be here. But I that's kind of why I'm going to Clemson, because for all the fun that I make of Dabo, like, he does have a very good program culture when it comes to these types of spots and making its guys show up and play hard.
Yeah, I think Clemson just also has better players on the defensive side of the football than North Carolina can match up with. Like, I think, Josh Downs, really good football player, but you've seen the last couple of weeks where teams have been able to affect Drake May, and teams have been able to get into a situation where you put North Carolina in some stressful situations on the offensive side of the ball, and it hasn't really gone well. And I think Clemson can definitely do that. So I am picking Clemson to win as well.
Perfect. All right, and then last but not least, we have the Big 10 championship game. Purdue at Wolverines, favored by 16.5.
Man, so this is a tough one, right? Like, Purdue, this Big Ten West, it came down to what? Like, I don't know, a 4-way tie. I don't know how far they had to go down, in like their tiebreakers or whatever for Purdue to end up in this situation. But I think at the end of the day, Purdue can make this game close. They have the ability to make the game close. If Aiden O'Connell is able to throw the ball, I think they have the ability to make the game close. But I don't know that Michigan is going to allow them to do it. So I think if you also look at, I think versus Northwestern a couple weeks ago, Purdue was just god awful in like a 17-9 win or something. So I'm going to go with Michigan. I'm going to go with Michigan to win big. I think Michigan's just going to bully ball them. I think Michigan's going to do kind of what they did to Ohio State, line it up and run it at them, and hope that run game is successful enough that it opens up some of those explosive opportunities in the pass game. So give me Michigan big. Give me Michigan to cover. Give me Michigan to make the CFP committee think if they're going to put Michigan number 1 in the final standings. I think Michigan's probably going to win that big.
I don't think they will do it. I think if they were going to move it to number 1, they would have done it last week.
I agree. Yeah.
So, yeah, Purdue. I'm gonna throw this in with one more LSU nugget. Like, if you look at LSU this year, their offense has hit a freeze point a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
Like against Auburn, Daniels was 8 of 20 passing for 80 yards. Against Arkansas, he's 8 of 15 passing for 86 yards and a pick, and they scored 10 points. And then, against Auburn, they scored 21 and 1 despite getting outgained by like double the yards, and really not. I think they had a defensive touchdown and like a special teams play kind of thing. Long story short, LSU, also 13 points against Tennessee. Much like the LSU offense has a freeze point that it hits against decent defenses, good defenses at times, and it's going to hit against Georgia tomorrow. Purdue also has quite the freeze point. It feels like an eternity since that 35-31 shootout they played with Penn State on opening night of the season. And yeah, I mean, they did get Illinois, but yeah, 17 points against Northwestern, as you alluded to earlier. 20 points against Minnesota, a 28-26 win over Florida Atlantic. I don't think Michigan messes around with this. And I mean, honestly, like, let's be honest, Ohio State's like just 1 or 2 degrees off from this Purdue offense when it comes to pass happiness. So,
yeah, true.
And Michigan obviously had a lot of success with them. So, I am going with Michigan minus 16.5, and I would suggest you hit that before it gets to 17 or 17.5. If you're into that type of action, which I am.
Me too. Same. All right, Graham, we got a big weekend of college football. Join us over at Dog Central if you haven't already. We have Graham has a great advanced stats preview of the SEC championship game. We will be having live discussion over there during the game as well. Obviously, we'll be talking about all the implications of the other championship games that go down this evening. And man, the season has gone by too quickly. But for some of us, it's not over.
It is not.
All right.
Not anywhere.
Alabama fans are wondering if they've seen the last game of Bryce Young in an Alabama uniform, while we're over here getting ready to run another college football playoff.
Who knows? You might have seen the last game of Nick Saban in an Alabama uniform as well.
Hey,
we'll see.